When do you think Bitcoin is going to see its first God candle?
In the next couple of weeks, we're going to see it go up, and people are just going to wish that we had big drawdowns so they could buy cheaper.
In this market analysis, we have a massive update from Samson Mao, who will share his insights on the current state of the Bitcoin market. Despite the market moving sideways at the moment, he remains highly confident that an Omega candle could emerge in the coming weeks. He'll also explain his reasoning and the process behind his predictions. Now let's dive in and hear what he has to say about this.
And what about the Omega?
Could be post-inauguration, but it's definitely coming closer because you can see more and more countries are talking about accumulating Bitcoin for their treasury.
Yeah.
So if the buying aligns in a certain day, then you'll see an Omega candle.
I think that the cycle is going to be completely different. I don't think we're going to see the 40, 50%, or sorry, not 40, 50, 70, 80% dips anymore. I think we're going to see like a staircase fashion. Would you agree with that?
I think you'll still see some volatility, but the volatility is going to be muted because there's just so much buy pressure, and now you have MicroStrategy in the S&P 100, and that makes them automatically allocated to a lot of passive funds that just will invest regardless of the price. So you have a new buyer of last resort. You already had buyers of last resort, which is us, the hodlers, but now you have another one, and a big one too. So we'll still see volatility, but you'll definitely see a lot less of those massive dips that we've had in the past. If you look at my Max Payne theory, it's that most people in the world are going to get priced out of buying Bitcoin at a cheap price very quickly, because that's the maximum detrimental thing to the most amount of people, right? And that's probably what's going to happen, that the power dynamic and economic dynamic in the world doesn't really change. The poor countries don't really get ahead. Maybe Bhutan and El Salvador now, because they have a lot. But, generally speaking, most countries don't have a policy in place or even a plan to put a policy in place. So they'll be left behind. And the US is going to be still the dominant financial center in the world. I think China really missed the mark. They just missed it. They cracked down on exchanges. They cracked down on mining when they could have been the Bitcoin superpower. And yeah, the US is going to end up as still dominant for another couple hundred years until MicroStrategy becomes a country. And then we'll see.
Yeah.
We're going to see it go up, and people are just going to wish that we had big drawdowns so they could buy cheaper. Because if you think about it, your average Bitcoiner that's making normal wages is going to buy a lot less Bitcoin as the price goes up. So they're going to hope that we do have a dip or we do have a crash, and it just won't come, and their ability to stack will just drop gradually, or not so gradually.
Yeah. What are your tips for how to navigate the next bull market?
If you're trying to get in for the first time, just do a lump sum buy and then DCA with what you can. But if you can lump sum buy, it'll be better.
Yeah, I think that's a smart tip. I think over time we're going to see Bitcoin's prices getting out of hand. There's going to be no bringing it back to earth once it reaches escape velocity.
Yeah, everyone thinks that they're really clever and I'll buy when it's cheap, but psychologically, if you're new to Bitcoin, you won't. And realistically, you're not going to be smart enough to catch the dip or be around to buy the dip too. So there's like two things going against you right off the bat. That's why I think doing a lump sum buy is probably better. And yeah, maybe it'll go down 10%, 20%, but you just have to look at it from a bird's eye view. Like, where is this going? And I think that's what a lot of people miss. A lot of analysts miss that. A lot of critics miss it. And it is really the replacement of all money. We do see a massive amount of stablecoin adoption, particularly in Latin America and just generally developing countries. And this is more driven out of necessity. So they're not really seeking Bitcoin. They're seeking US dollars or digital dollars. And in places like Latin America, they don't even say Tether. Like, they just say digital dollars because for them, it's synonymous. But they are seeking out stability in light of their currency problems at home and the debasement and inflation of their own currencies. So I believe that as Bitcoiners and people trying to push for Bitcoin adoption, we can leverage that and bring people into Bitcoin by offering stable coins in a Bitcoin wallet, which has not been something that most Bitcoin wallets have focused on in the past, but it's something that we are very much focused on. So that's sort of a Trojan horse for us, getting more people that are just looking for digital dollars into Bitcoin. But to answer your other question, I believe everyone will eventually have to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, simply because no one will want dollars in the end. So if the dollar keeps devaluing, which it has been over the past 100 years, almost to zero, then eventually people will say, I will not sell you this bread or these eggs for dollars. I want Bitcoin. And this is at the point at which you don't have a choice. You have to adopt Bitcoin as your currency, because if you do not do that, then you won't be able to buy anything. Well, I think most Bitcoiners, like a fair amount of Bitcoiners, don't want to spend their Bitcoin, but
Sure.
a good portion do, simply for the goal of spreading awareness and adoption. But there's a simple way around that, which is spend and replace. So while you can still buy Bitcoin with dollars, you can spend the Bitcoin and replace it by buying it back later. And in doing so, you're sort of fostering the emergence of circular economies where people accept Bitcoin and they spend Bitcoin out again. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to jumpstart that process somehow. There are definitely forces out there that don't want Bitcoin to be adopted. Some of it is not so covert. So you see the IMF actively at work trying to convince El Salvador to roll back or dial back their Bitcoin law or minimize it in some way. You've also seen the IMF exert pressure on Argentina. If you go back a couple of years, you'll see Argentina had a sort of a letter of intent saying they're not going to do anything with Bitcoin. But in other places too, that countries we've engaged in, such as Suriname, we met with their central bank, we presented a plan there, and then a few weeks later, the World Bank visited, and suddenly things go quiet. So we know for a fact that there are definitely interested parties that don't want Bitcoin to be adopted worldwide as money.
Bitcoin's price took a big hit over 2 days, worrying investors and wiping out most of its gains from early 2025. It dropped to $92,900 today, leaving traders unsure about what's next. The fall happened because of growing concerns about inflation, higher bond yields, and possible new U.S. tariff policies. Strong U.S. economic reports this week made people think the Federal Reserve might keep raising interest rates for longer, according to CNBC. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yield jumped, affecting risky investments like Bitcoin. Earlier this week, Bitcoin was trading above $102,000, but dropped nearly 5% in one day. As of now, it's priced at $94,300, a 2% decrease from the day before.